Hi, Carly. Welcome to the Getting Married Multiculturally podcast. I'm so excited to have you here today.
Hi, Dee. It's so lovely to be here. I can't even express it. When you reached out to me, I feel like we were kindred spirits,
Yes.
like lost across two continents that have now found each other.
Yes, me too, me too. Just to tell the listeners a little bit how I found you, I was just browsing on, and I might say the name wrongly, Udemy,
Oh,
Udemy,
you said it. That's it.
Udemy,
Udemy. Mm-hmm.
udemy.com. It's an online learning platform, and you have a few courses there. And, I was just looking to see what's out there. And when I saw that you're also working with multicultural couples, and oh, I didn't even say what you're doing.
It's
You
okay.
are a wedding celebrant.
Hmm.
And then I saw that you're actually from America and you live in Europe. And I thought that's just a perfect match. And my listeners would love to hear everything from you that you experienced and learn and what you do. So that's what today we're going to talk about. But before we get into all of that, why don't you tell them a little bit about who you are, where you live, where you're from, and what you're doing, just briefly?
Okay, sounds good. So like you said, I'm American, originally from Florida, but even then, when I turned 18, I ran off to Vegas for a couple of years. Then I lived in Charleston, South Carolina, and then I did graduate school in Washington, D.C. before moving to Europe. And then I lived first in Italy, which is where I met my husband, who is Portuguese. And then we lived in London, then we lived in Croatia, and then finally, 3 years ago, we made our way here to Portugal, to Porto in the north, where he is from. And as for what I do, I originally studied development economics and spent a decade working in the United Nations, the World Bank, and other international organizations. A few years ago, I kind of fled that life and reinvented myself. That included co-founding a food tour with my husband. At one point, we started a co-working space, and then kind of on a weird whim, started this business of being a wedding celebrant. And it has now just grown into my main activity. I've grown my team, and this is what I love to do now.
That's amazing. It feels like a whole journey that led you to, put that all under one umbrella and now just, share all that experience with people and couples.
That
That's
that
amazing.
is exactly what it feels like, actually. Kind of like everything just was headed this way. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And we actually have two, how do you say that, common points in our life. I lived in
Ooh.
Italy and Milan
Oh,
for a
very
few
nice.
years.
Mhm.
And I also love Croatia. I was actually born in Serbia, so we used to go to
Okay.
Croatia a bunch of times when I was little. Well, it was
Oh, that's
Yugoslavia
nice.
back then.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But
that's
still just as
amazing.
beautiful.
Yeah.
Um, oh, that's so wonderful.
Yeah. Did you have a chance to learn some Croatian, Italian?
Italian, I did. I was learning it while I was there, and then I met my Portuguese husband.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember we were standing in the kitchen of my tiny little Italian apartment in Rome, and he was saying something really beautiful to me. And then he stopped and he looked at me and said, I could say so much more beautiful things to you in Portuguese.
Oh.
And I, of course, swooned. It was like, of course I'll learn your language. So I threw out Italian and got a Portuguese book as soon as I could. As for Croatian, I did learn it while I was there, and I really did love it, as complex as Slavic languages
Yeah.
is, but now it's been 3.5 years since we left, and unfortunately, I don't have lots of opportunities to practice. So just
Yeah.
English and Portuguese for now.
That's so fun. I love that what your husband said. I should tell that to my husband too. I can say so many beautiful things in Hungarian. Cuz
Exactly. It really works. It
yeah.
does.
Well, first when we met, he was really excited like, "Oh, sure, I'll learn Hungarian." And when he realized how difficult the language is, like, "Oh no, what did I what did I promise her?"
Yeah, I was gonna say, I feel like Hungarian is one of those very special European
Uh,
languages that's all on its own. So,
yes.
yeah, I can understand his struggle.
Yeah. Okay, so you said that you're yourself also in a multicultural marriage,
Hmm.
and you want to share a little bit out about. so you said you guys met in Italy, but a little bit about you guys get got engaged, and then how were you going about planning your wedding? Did you have a also a blended multicultural wedding? And just share a little bit about your story, because I'm assuming, if am I remembering correctly, you weren't really into the wedding industry back then, right? So how
Uh,
would you did you experience that as a couple?
okay, sounds good. Well, I guess I should probably admit that when I first met my husband, I told him that I did not believe in marriage. And that was pretty much true for the first 28 years of my life. And then he asked me to marry him. And he pretty much just admitted that it was the most terrifying thing that he's ever done in his life. But I said yes. So good on him for asking. But at the time, we were living in London.
Mhm.
And exactly that. We were trying to think, how do we kind of have a wedding that involves everyone?
Mhm.
So we did something that I don't recommend anyone ever does. And we had three weddings.
Oh,
I don't recommend doing
that's
it.
crazy.
Yeah. So we did the legal bit in London. We went to Westminster City Hall, signed the paper, went to the pub, had our friends round for a drink. It was great. But we weren't done there because most of our family didn't come. We actually, when we went to the registrar to like do the legal part, we actually brought our iPad and our iPhones and we Skyped in our family so that they
Oh.
could be there with us. But that didn't feel like it was enough. So then we came here to Porto, where Miguel is from, and that was sort of our big party where we invited our friends from all over the world to come here to the city that we loved. And we decided we wanted to have another ceremony. But yeah, like you said, I knew nothing about the wedding industry and I didn't even know what a celebrant was. So we went about just trying to figure out how to create a ceremony on our own and create a ceremony that was exactly that, a reflection of our cultures, our languages, and our personalities. And back then, I mean, this was almost 6 years ago, there wasn't a lot of information about how you do that and how you do that well. So we had seen friends who did different versions of things, but we kind of settled on the idea of that we really wanted it to be in both languages, but we didn't want to repeat it. And that was important more so because I'm really privileged here in Portugal. A lot of young people speak English incredibly well. My in-laws all speak English wonderfully. I was blessed in that sense, but it still felt like it was important that we weren't just having an American ceremony in English in Portugal, that it was both of us. Um, so I would say for that, we kind of just went with the things that were for reflections of us. And we didn't have a celebrant. We had a mix of friends and family deliver different parts of the ceremony that we had created. And then from there, I feel like there's not a ton of very specific Portuguese cultural elements in the ceremony itself, but the wedding day was definitely like a reflection of it. So I remember during our like cocktail hour, we had two musicians playing Portuguese guitars. We had I mean, in the States, you'd call it a cocktail hour, right?
Mhm.
And I remember here in Portugal, weddings are all about food. So I'd say that's the biggest element, that Portugueseness that we brought to our wedding. And I remember going around during this quote unquote cocktail hour where they were serving all of this food. There was a grill, there was all this meat, there were drinks flowing. And I had to go around and tell my non-Portuguese friends, like, hey guys, slow down. There's actually still a 5-course meal to come. This is just the beginning. And they're all like, what? Are you serious? I'm like, yeah, yeah, this is just the start. And then I remember, so that was just, I think that was the biggest part, Portuguese kind of element to it. And
Mhm.
also, there's another great Portuguese tradition, which is essentially after dinner, kind of like halfway through the night when you've been drinking and dancing, they then bring the hot food back out and you have a caldo verde, which is like a warm shredded cabbage soup, and you have broa, which is this like really hearty bread, and it's all perfect. Kind of like drunken dance food because you kind of like get some more energy, you fill your stomach up, and then you dance some more.
Mhm.
So we made sure to include all of the Portuguese food related traditions. Um, and then we did our third wedding, which was a more intimate one. Most of my family couldn't come from the States. So this was just in our backyard. One of my sisters performed the ceremony. My brother-in-law who's a chef. He catered it. So it was just my closest family that was there with us. And so that was our three weddings that we
Mm-hmm.
did. I don't recommend anyone do that.
Yeah, well, it sounds at first a little bit like exhausting and overwhelming, but I love that you made everything so personal. You involved a lot of people in your family. You made an effort of, putting these elements in that you maybe felt lacking. Like American traditions don't have much focus on food, so you gonna put that attention from the other culture. So I love that. And yeah, it feels exhausting, but I feel like you made it as less stressful as possible, without trying to find vendors and relying on other people that are maybe, strangers or that you wouldn't trust.
Exactly. It was an exhausting year of weddings, but we loved each one of them. So yeah,
Yeah, that's
we're good
good.
though. We're
Yeah.
good for a few years.
So it feels like you learned a lot along the way when you planned those three weddings. You really and was that the moment when you kind of felt like I want to do this for my life?
For sure. So I think at the end of all those weddings, I discovered two things. One is that I am not a wedding planner. Those people are angels. They're wonderful. I'm not one of them. And then the other thing was that I really loved wedding ceremonies, but I kind of didn't know what I was going to do with that information until I think it was just after our third wedding. My best friend, who is a wedding planner, she's one of those angels who she's English. She lives in Italy. We met while we were living in Italy. She lives there with her Italian husband. So she also lives a very multicultural story. She called me up one day and said, "Hey, can you come to Florence and marry this couple in Portuguese and English?" And I was pretty much like, what do I know about marrying people? And she said, "Well, Carly, you've been married 3 times. That's more than most people. You're a great writer. You're a great speaker. Like, just meet the couple and see what happens." So I sat down with Carl and Larissa, and I would say that was the moment. That was definitely the moment when I sat down with them and they started telling me about their love story. I remember they told me their first date lasted 16 hours. So it started when they both met for a drink after work, and it only ended when they both had to leave that same bar the next morning to go home and get changed to then go back to work.
Oh, that just
Um,
gives me goosebumps.
exactly. I just knew in that moment, I was
Yeah.
like, how amazing is this job? People who I've never met are sitting down and sharing with me incredibly intimate, personal stories about themselves, about their love. And they're asking me to then be a part of one of the most intimate rituals that we have
Mhm.
as a culture, as a people, as a species. And I just thought that that was my moment.
Mhm.
That was the moment when I said, okay, this is what I want to do.
Mhm. I think a wedding photographer is kind of has the same feeling when you're just there in this intimate moment. You're observing the couples. You have to sense the feelings, the emotions, so you can capture them. It's kind of that feeling of you feel so honored that they let me be here in this bubble in their space and to share that with them, and that requires a big trust, definitely.
Mhm.
So they
It
have to
does.
trust you.
It is one of the privileges of this job for sure. I think, yeah, I think that sort of intimacy is something that I really cherish. And I do tell every couple that I work with that I take this as a big honor and a responsibility that they've invited
Yeah.
me to be part of their day. And I do everything I can to honor that trust that they've put in me.
Yes, yes. So you founded your company is called your European Wedding Celebrant, which I love. It just kind of tells it all.
Try to get everything in there.
Yes, yes, yes. So tell us a little bit about what inspired you to be specifically for multicultural couples. Did you find any need or lack of in this industry, in a wedding industry, for couples to find somebody who specializes and understands them more?
Yeah. Definitely, I would say, and it grew out of I did see that lack because it grew out of my own experience when I was researching my own wedding and how to incorporate languages and cultures. And I really didn't feel like there was anything there.
Mm-hmm.
And that's exactly what I thought to focus on because I had been there and I could just empathize. I knew what it was like to come from another country, to come to Portugal, to marry into a Portuguese family, and not to say every Portuguese family is alike or in any means or in any way, but just to say that I can understand, especially coming from an Anglophone background, just kind of the differences you might run into
Mm-hmm.
or expectations or things like that. And I could be there to guide them and help them along the way. And so it just felt like a really natural extension of my own experience to then share that knowledge that I had earned and learned with
Mm-hmm.
other couples in the same situation.
Mm-hmm. Did you have any sort of say culture shocks when comparing American weddings to European weddings? And I'm saying European just in general, not maybe not
Hmm.
specifically Portuguese, but have you were there any surprises like, oh, that's the way to do it? And how did you sort of learn and educate yourself to be knowledge in European weddings, after living in America?
Yeah. Luckily I had lots of friends who got married, so
Uh-huh.
that was helpful. But I think so going back to what was my biggest culture shock, I think the biggest culture shock I had was actually kind of the formality of weddings.
Mhm.
Sort of watching them occur in, say, the Catholic Church, where, if you're not a really active member of the church, it's essentially mass plus a little bit talk about love. And I noticed, or it would be just the legal bit, which is very formulaic and again, not personal. And the people doing these ceremonies, they just wouldn't have intimate knowledge of these couples. It really didn't feel like they knew them or they knew their story. So I think that was kind of my biggest culture shock was just realizing, oh wow, it felt like the ceremony was something to be suffered through or just
Mhm.
something to get done so we could then get to the party part. Um, and as for educating myself on that, I realized I didn't necessarily want to educate myself on the way things had been. I think what I've always tried to focus on educating myself on is if a couple comes to me and they come from a specific nationality, and usually I ask them, do you have cultural rituals that you would like to include? Then I'll go and I will do my research and I'll connect with other people who are maybe in the wedding industry in say
Mhm.
Poland or somewhere else in Morocco and kind of ask, what's the meaning behind this? What's the significance? And come back to the couple and talk about,
Mhm.
okay, this is what my research has found. Does this feel right to you? Do you want to adapt it? Do you want to change it so it fits you more? So I think I've never really tried to learn, say, what a European wedding should look like, but always have kept myself just open to the possibilities of what a couple could want.
Mhm. That's so good. That just gave me so many thoughts that I never really thought about. That intimacy and that getting, because I've been weddings in Europe and Hungary, and it's the same thing, just getting through it, hours long,
God.
boring. And then we
Yeah.
would also have the church ceremony, and then we would have to walk to the, what's it called in English, where they
Like
get
the
like a
notaries.
courthouse
Oh,
type of
yeah.
thing when they
Mhm.
actually sign the papers and everything.
Yep.
And but the fun part between those two events is that we would walk to that other location in a big like line of people, and we would just yell and sing and
That
have
sounds
that
amazing.
celebration, and people would, I don't know if you saw it in Croatia, they do that with car
Yes.
lines,
Yes.
and then they
I've
would
seen
not
it. I
then
love
have
it.
the flags up there.
Yep.
I know. I saw one of those this summer and I was like, "Oh, I wish I could go with you."
No, I think that's a perfect example of kind of what I feel like is maybe wrong with ceremonies is the
Mhm.
fact that the fun part is happening outside of the ceremony.
Yeah.
Like I think that jubilation, that excitement, that fun should I actually love this kind of walk. I think that's great, but that fun should also be happening in the ceremony
Mhm.
itself too. Um,
Definitely. So, what would you say? How would you encourage couples who maybe they only had this experience of dry ceremonies, boring, long ones, and guests know that, oh, we have to go to this wedding, but it's going to be fun after that. So, what would your initial suggestion be to just get them started, to just wrap their head around of, you know what, you can do it differently? What would your how would you help them to just get it started to make it more
Yeah.
personalized?
So what usually happens for me is couples will come to me, not they usually don't know what they want, but they
Mm-hmm.
know what they don't want. And that is dry, boring, and
Mm-hmm.
stuffy. So I said, okay, you've seen what you don't want. But let's just even erase that from your memory. Like, try and think about this as we can start from scratch. Most couples really do want to keep the structure and keep what they've seen, and some just want to tinker at the edges, but some really want to recreate the whole kind of concept of what a wedding ceremony looks like. And that's what I try and create a space where I say, this is okay. This is safe. We can experiment. You throw out ideas. I'm going to give you my feedback from my experience, and we can just talk about this.
Mm-hmm.
And usually, what I tell couples is think about what your relationship means to you and think about what this ceremony means to you. Like, okay, since I'm a symbolic wedding celebrant, you're not legally required to get married with me. So you've
Mm-hmm.
gone and you've done the legal requirement and you're consciously seeking me out. So tell me, what do you, I usually ask, how do you want your wedding ceremony to make you feel?
Mm-hmm.
When you look back on your wedding ceremony, like when you're thinking about being in the moment, what is the feeling that you want to have? Do you want to just be full of jubilation? Do you want to feel like you're kind of wrapped in this blanket of love by all of your guests there? Or do you just want to feel like your eyes are only for your partner and then this is all about the two of you? I mean, this is the first question I sort of asked to kind of nudge them in the direction of thinking less about what the ceremony is and its structure and more about how it makes them feel. Because once I know how they want to feel, then we can
Mm-hmm.
we can build everything around that. And then we also have a base. So when we talk about, okay, does the bride want to be walked down the aisle by her father or by her parents? Um, how does that make her feel? And I'm just gonna say right now, I apologize if I like fall back into like bride and groom. I want to try and be
Right.
as inclusive as possible
Yes.
to all couples. But so yeah, bride or brides or grooms when they want to walk in as well too. Like I always go back to that base of feeling. How will that make you feel? Will it
Mm-hmm.
make you feel really loved? Will it be part of the jubilation? If so, then yes, let's do it. If it's not going to feed that, then let's stay away from that.
Mm-hmm. That's really good. Yeah, I'm just taking notes here because I'm also
Oh,
learning
good. I'm
so many
happy
good
to
things.
share. I love talking about this stuff.
I love what you said. How would you want you to make you feel at the end? And I'm always, I have more experiences as a somebody on a weddings from behind a camera, and I always say the same thing because I don't like too many poses and creating a fake environment just to have a good photo or interrupting the moment. And I just want them to, how you feel, and when you see these pictures after the wedding, how do you want that make you feel? Not like, oh, the photographer told me to stand here and to stand, do this, do that. So it's just the same goal, I guess, that we
Yeah,
have, that we want the couples to feel. Yeah.
that's very true.
I
That's
have
very
I
true. Of
have like a technical question. So you said
course.
that you don't marry them legally. What do couples usually do? Do they sign the papers before or after or on the same day? What's usually been your advice or experience?
So with international couples, and I mean international, even I've had couples. So one couple, she was Canadian, he was Irish, but she has a
Mm-hmm.
Portuguese passport and
Mm-hmm.
he's European. And even for them, it was really painful to
Mm-hmm.
go through the process. In the end, they ended up just doing it in Canada where they lived. And
Uh-huh.
this is actually for most destination wedding couples or destination wedding couples or couples who are not residing in Portugal, I tell them just do the legal bit at home. Like it will always be so much easier than having to do it here because it'll involve a lot of translation of documents. And then
Mm-hmm.
even once you're married, it will require a lot of translation of documents back the other way to make sure that your marriage is legally recognized in your home country. So that said, I really tell couples, this is a stressor that you don't need to have.
Yeah.
And I've had couples who tell me, but if we don't make it legal, like if it's not the legal wedding, if it's not the
Yeah.
real wedding, our family won't come. What I
Uh-huh.
tell them is I say, I'm not going to lie to anyone in your family, but I'm also can make it look as real as you want. I'm not going to tell anyone this is a symbolic wedding ceremony. And we even have specifically for these kinds of situations, we have my team, we created a wedding certificate. Looks very
Oh, I
official and all
love
of this stuff.
that.
And so if couples, they want to sign it and they want to have, witnesses come up and sign it and it kind of gives the feel of the legal wedding, we'll do that to help our couples essentially get over this hurdle of needing it to be the quote unquote real wedding
Mm-hmm.
to kind of incentivize their families to come. Because to be perfectly honest, the real wedding here in Portugal, it's very formulaic. It's a contract. That's why only lawyers or priests can marry people in this country. The reason it's lawyers is because it's a contract. That's how the Portuguese state views it. And yes, that is what a marriage is. It's a contract between two people. But I think you could also approach it in a much more beautiful
Yeah.
way. And yeah, and I think you just have a lot more flexibility when doing a symbolic wedding ceremony. So that's what I suggest with couples. That said, if they really want to, I suggest they, sign the paper maybe the day before
Mm-hmm.
or even in the morning. Sometimes we have been asked to mix ceremonies where the legal person in Portugal, it's called the conservador, is brought in, essentially does the legal part, and then either before, after, or around it, we build one of our personalized wedding
Mm-hmm.
ceremonies.
Oh, that's good. They can come to the scene so they don't have to go to the courthouse.
Exactly.
Oh,
Yes, they
that
can.
makes it
Yeah,
easier.
it is. And I
Yeah.
mean, it's nice and they can be really flexible and some of them are really good. But again, the law just goes back to there's certain things that have to be said
Mm-hmm.
and they don't spend time with the couples like we
Yeah.
do. They'll meet them a couple minutes before and then, they'll just be there for the ceremony. I remember I once met one of these conservadores and she was talking to me and she was saying, I don't understand what you do. What's the point? Like I do the legal part. And I said, and we were talking about this, I was trying to explain, our goal is to create something really personal. And I remember she said to me, well, I could have personalized the ceremony. They could have added a reading if they wanted to. I'm
Uh-huh.
like, yeah, we go a little bit more personal than just adding a reading. And then
Uh-huh.
she said to me, and then I said something at the end like, well, it was the day of the wedding. It was about 10 minutes before the wedding ceremony was about to start. And I said, well, this is what the couple's decided, and
Yeah.
we're here to make the couple happy. And
Yeah.
she responded to me, that's not my job. I'm not here to make them
Oh.
happy. I'm here to marry them. And that's when I thought, yep. And that's why I have a
That's
job.
why you, yes.
Exactly. This is why couples hire me and my team. It's so that we can, yeah, our sole purpose is the couple's happiness.
Well,
Yeah.
at least she knows her job, where her place is, you know.
Yeah.
She's not
Yeah.
trying anything extra or different, you know.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
just comes out
Yeah.
with the papers. I
Yep.
mean, to be honest, I'm the person who is more like thinking about logistics and the reality of things, and especially coming from Europe, the same thing. And the biggest cultural shock for American weddings for me was that they would have this big, amazing ceremony, and then the couples would just go away behind the scenes, just quickly sign a paper in the dark on a table. And I'm like,
Yeah.
wait, everybody needs to be here and see this big moment of you signing this paper. Like, no, that's okay. We are already married. And I always
Yeah.
having a hard time understanding, but like the way you explained it to me, I can now understand that it really, this is a paper. Or if people get married in front of God, if they have a religious
Mhm.
ceremony at the church, then they take that as a, now we're married for real and
Mhm.
forever. You know, they
Yeah.
don't even care about signing the paper. So it really is about what you believe in at the
Yeah.
end, right?
Exactly. I
Yeah.
completely agree. That is what I
Yeah.
tell couples all the time. Like, you're gonna do, and I say this, I mean, we had three weddings, and our legal wedding in London, I mean, it's the one that I remember the least.
Uh-huh.
Uh, Also because we had to say specific vows and it was just about signing a paper. It was
Mm-hmm.
maybe it's 15 minutes, but our weddings here in Portugal and then the one in the US, like they just meant so much more to me because they were personal and it was making the promise and the vow to commit to this other person in front of my community, in front of the people who I was closest to. So whether or not the state recognized that didn't really matter to me. So yeah, I guess maybe that's the American in me, like the legal bit, we did that. All right, that's
Yes.
fine. Let's go do the
Yes.
fun version of it, the enjoyable version.
Yeah. And I also feel like, as I was thinking about questions to ask you, I kept thinking like, oh no, this is a question for a wedding planner. This is a question for a coordinator. And I kept going back and forth of, so what really falls into your bubble? What really do you do other than just stand there for, just in
Yeah.
quotes? I know you do other things to get to know couples and prepare them,
hmm
but when it comes to the actual, so yeah, my question is, what else do you do other than getting them married and saying all these
hmm
beautiful words and putting those together?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, yeah, exactly. Our scope, we really try not to, while there's someone in my team and she does do wedding planning and coordination, she does it for really small weddings or funky weddings. She has very
Mm-hmm.
specific taste for kind of what she goes after. But the majority of our team, we are wedding celebrants. So, our job is we get to know couples, we spend hours with them on Skype, we write their completely unique wedding ceremony, we go back and forth with them, make sure we perfect it. Then so day before we do rehearsals. So rehearsals are really cultural. Us Anglophones, man, we love a rehearsal.
Mm-hmm.
The English Americans, we love it, but Canadians, Aussies, but the rest of Europe really not that big into the rehearsal. They're
Really?
like, yeah, we'll figure it out. Um, but I think there's something great about rehearsals. And so I think that's actually a really important aspect of what we do is we run that rehearsal and it's just a way for us to show the couple like this is what's going to happen, like walk them step by step through it, kind of, if we're doing a ritual, kind of the moving parts between it, practice if they're doing repeat after me vows or anything like that, kind of practicing those with them to make them feel comfortable. And then on the day, our job is to essentially make sure that within the bubble of the ceremony that all runs well. So I'm there an hour before. I'm doing mic checks. I'm talking with your DJ or your orchestra or a string quartet, making sure we've got all the timings for the music. Maybe you have a gospel choir. We've had quite a few weddings this year with gospel choirs. So making sure we've got all the timing right for, I'm going to say this and then this is when we're going to intro this song and then we're going to have that play for, I don't know, 6 bars and then we're going to have that fade out as we move into this next part. So everything that's happening in those, say, we usually run our wedding ceremonies between 25 and 35 to 40 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Everything within that moment is on us.
Mm-hmm.
So and then pretty much
You're
from
in
the time,
charge with that
yeah,
time frame. So even
exactly.
if they have a coordinator or a planner, you say, I'm in charge with this chunk of time, and then you do everything before and after.
I mean, I would never go to a wedding planner or a wedding coordinator and say I'm in charge by any means.
No,
Um,
they don't like that.
yeah, no, 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 they don't. And I appreciate that. It's their show. I very
Yeah.
much like to say, I like to be there for wedding planners and wedding coordinators to say, hey, I'm here to help you. Like, I'm here to work together. Like, this is how I do things. Like, if you need something to be changed or if we need to adapt things, we'll work on that together. But I want you
Mm-hmm.
to know that me or anyone on my team who's there, like they're on the ball. And I always like to think that maybe we're one of the vendors who give our wedding planners the least amount of stress because
Mm-hmm.
we try and be just really on top of things and be really helpful. So by the time the last person of the couple, so whether that be a bride or whether that be the groom and the bride or brides and grooms, once they're up there standing with me, then kind of I'm in control of that.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, coordinating whatever moving pieces need to happen because if we needed to have the sand brought up or something like that, I would have talked about that already with the coordinator or with whoever's in charge beforehand. And then once they kiss and then they're down the aisle, um, my job is
Yeah.
done. I'm
Yes.
there to toast with them,
Yeah.
toast to them. So yeah.
Yeah. I love it. So let's talk a little bit about multicultural couples, intercultural couples who come together from two different traditions and wedding traditions. So,
Yeah.
what would your advice be? And I know this is a big question and it's really specific to certain cultures, but I just see a lot of these questions of couples kind of being so stressed about, should I have one ceremony and blend the two traditions together and just do everything at once? Should I have two separate ceremonies on one day or have another ceremony on another day? So, and I know there's other aspects to that question. Do you need to change your outfit? Do you have a different language? So do you have a specific ritual that needs to be done? So I know it's kind of a very difficult question to answer, I think, but from your experience, advice would you give to them?
So I would start by saying it depends a lot on the cultures. So if it's say a European, a Western Europe, Eastern European, a European in general marrying say a North American, there's a lot of crossover in kind of in a lot of the structure, how it looks, like the overall form of it. So rituals might differ. So I think in that case, probably I don't know if I want to say blending makes it seem like, right, when you blend spinach and strawberries
Uh-huh.
together, it kind of makes this murky color. I don't
Uh,
know if it's blend, and so I just made a spinach and
uh-huh.
strawberry smoothie last night. So instead of kind of making the murkiness, right, you want to still have the spinach and the strawberry like bright and
Ah.
vibrant in their colors. So maybe mixing isn't the word I would use, but bringing it all together. Because for me, that's what your marriage, not your wedding day, but your marriage going forward, that's what it's going to be. It's going to be a combination of your histories, your cultures, your past, your languages. It's going to all come together to create this beautiful multicultural, multilingual future. So I think when you're coming from cultures that have similarities in structure, and you can then blend them easily or bring them together easily under one ceremony, I think that's a really great way to do it. I think when you have cultures that have very distinct wedding rituals, then having multiple ceremonies potentially in multiple places makes sense. So one bride and groom that I married, she's of Scottish descent, raised in Portugal, married to a man from India, from Eastern India. So they here in Portugal, we had what you would consider more of a Western European kind of or a Western wedding ceremony.
Mm-hmm.
On the other hand, they're then going to go back to India and have a traditional Indian wedding ceremony, with the multi days and with hundreds of people.
Yeah.
And so when I think of those two as very distinct, and I think it kind of, I think they stand alone fully and on their own individually. So you don't necessarily need to blend them. That said, if cost is another
Yeah.
concern, then yeah, of course you could always mix your cultures and bring them together. I never think that's impossible. I just think it's probably a lot easier when the base structure is very similar.
Mm-hmm. What if the couple agrees on that and they want to, you know, bring them together? We're not gonna use
Yeah,
the word blended because I love that analogy. That yes, it doesn't get mercury. It just gets you get them separated.
yeah.
But what if they have family members who say, no, you have to have this specific ceremony, how I got
Mhm.
married, or this is just how we do it? That's usually what they
Yeah.
say. I feel like this is another big worry that it's daunting on couples when they are, because parents usually or grandparents have a hard time understanding the modern world we live in, and we are gonna blend together, and we have this person who is going to be part of our family that we need to respect and honor their traditions too.
Yeah, I think that's such a good point. That like the pressure that I I feel for couples who have a lot of pressure from their families because I feel very lucky in the fact that my husband and I didn't. We really, and our families have just never hesitated in welcoming each of us, which has been so wonderful. And I feel for couples where that's a harder thing. So I think in these situations, I think it's really important to try and work with your family members to break apart what is tradition for tradition's sake and tradition because of its significance. So,
Mm-hmm.
right, if there's a tradition in your family and you're just doing it because it's always been done, or a wedding ceremony is always done this way, I have hard times with that because I have hard times encouraging my couples to do things when they're doing it just to make someone else happy. That said, though, if there is significance for it behind that ritual for the couple and for the family, so if the couple can get at why that ritual or why that wedding format is important for the family, then we can start to understand, oh, okay, this is important because it symbolizes like the unification of your souls together. Okay, like that, we can talk about that and we can integrate that into a larger ceremony, and we can make sure that that feeling, that base, yeah, that feeling behind the tradition, we can make sure that that isn't lost in that ceremony.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's really important. Doing things tradition for tradition's sake, like, that's really on the couple to talk with their family. And I I would never want a wedding ceremony to create friction in a family. But at the same time, you may want to, if that wedding ceremony is creating friction with your family, you may want to tackle that because that might be a sign that future things where you
Yes.
have to blend your cultures, like, I don't know if you choose to have children or where you choose to live or the type of career that you choose to pursue, those weights, that familial pressure or tradition may come back into play. So, your wedding ceremony like is a really good time to kind of like set some boundaries about what your marriage is going to look like. So yeah, but at the same time, when you make a decision to do something or not do something that your family really wants, talk to them. Make sure you include them in that decision. Like I'll give an example. So for my wedding here in Portugal, uh, my husband and I have lived before our wedding. We had lived together for years. We were already legally married. Um, it felt really important to me to not be walked down the aisle.
Uh-huh.
Um, I wanted to enter with him. Like that felt like I wanted us to enter into our wedding ceremony together because just the symbolism of that felt really important to me. We also actually didn't even have an aisle because we
Mm-hmm.
just wanted everyone to like mix together. So we actually kind of like entered from around a building from the front and kind of were there in the beginning. And that felt really important to me. Also, that meant like when we left, we kind of like absconded to have a moment by ourselves, which was wonderful. So that said, my father did really want to to give me away. So we talked about how we could change that. So what we did was what he suggested and what we worked on together was when we did our first dance together, and that was a very American thing that I imported. I really wanted that father-daughter dance, and
Mm-hmm.
so we had that. And after that, what my dad suggested is so then the music would change, and then Miguel, my husband, would come to the dance floor, and my father would just, kind of offer my hand over to
Oh,
my kind of like that tradition of like, kind of passing on.
yeah.
And so while I personally don't love the old kind of thinking of like, a woman being a piece of property who is passed from one man, her father, to her next man,
Mm-hmm.
her husband, I could understand why that felt important for my father. And he had done that with my oldest sister. And so that said, though, in our wedding at home in Florida, I did have my father kind of walk me down the aisle. Really important and significant for all of us. And so it was really important for me to explain to him my thinking and then hear and understand where he was coming from. And so that
Yeah.
we could all meet in the middle and we could find a way to work on that. I think I think that's what it comes down to, right? In anything in life, relationships, whether it be with your partner
Yeah.
or whether it be talking about stuff is good. Yeah.
Yes. That's a really good point that you the wedding is kind of that point of making your family and your parents understand that this is now forever and this is how our life is going to be, and everything else in the future is going to be mixed and compromised, and need to have a conversation, making sure that feelings don't get hurt, and we both have to bend a little bit and not just be so stiff and say, no, this is just how it is. And really, wedding, if couples think that I just need to get through this day and everything's going to be fine after that, that's not how it's going to be.
Exactly.
There's going to be a lot of other issues that you have to
Exactly, that you have to talk to. Like, I actually think that's kind of one of the, and you probably get this. Like, so one of the greatest things about being in a multicultural relationship is that you never get to take things for granted.
Mm-hmm.
I think when you marry someone from your own culture, there's a lot of things that you can just take for granted.
Mm-hmm.
That this is just how things are always done, and this is how we will do it. But when you both raised in different countries with different languages, different expectations, that's not how it is. You have to talk through everything. And I think that's kind of beautiful, and it makes for a healthier, it just makes for a healthier relationship.
And sometimes there are things that you just used to do it this way and you nobody questioned you. And now my husband will say, like, you do this, but why? And I'm thinking, oh, no, I don't really know why. That's just how exactly. And then I have to think about it and process it. So I'm learning about myself too, It's very interesting. Okay, guys, I think this is where I'm going to put the pause into our conversation. As you can see, we can chat for hours about this topic, but we will take a break for now. And in part 2, we will be talking about how to have a bilingual wedding ceremony so all the guests can feel included. And what amazes me the most is that Carly is so passionate about making the best experience for her couples that she even learned a few sentences in other languages, which I think is pretty amazing. We will also be talking about how to write your personalized vows, how to prepare for a wedding if you are not hiring a wedding celebrant, what questions to ask from your celebrant that you're considering to hire. Carly will have some advice for same-sex couples, how to plan your destination wedding, elopement wedding, who's the elopement wedding right for. She will be sharing some of her favorite inspirational multicultural wedding stories, which are my favorite. And she's also talking about her courses that she has on Udemy. They are helping couples how to write their wedding vows and speeches. So as you can see, we will be covering a ton next time. But if you want to connect with Carly until then, you can find her on Instagram at Your Wedding Celebrant. Her website is youreuropeanweddingcelebrant.com. Same on Facebook, facebook.com/Your European Wedding Celebrant. And for her courses, you can just go to udemy.com and search for her name, Carly Petracco. But you can find all of these links that I mentioned and the audio, our video recording on my blog, which is editvashadi.com/blog. And before I leave, I wanted to ask you a tiny little favor. If you are enjoying these interviews, if you like the podcast, to please go on iTunes and leave a review for me. That will help other couples discover this podcast. Talk to you next week. Bye, everybody.